Hello and welcome to another episode of Invalid Entry. Today we are looking at why I haven't made a video for the past month. That is because I've been doing one of my other hobbies called amateur radio or ham radio. Earlier in the year my daughter actually passed her foundation radio license, which in the UK is your most entry-level radio license. I'm very proud of that, and we decided that we would have some fun with the radio, so we devised this little, it's not a competition, challenge where between my dad, me and her, we would try and work as many Maidenhead Fields as possible, which means first of all we have to explain what Maidenhead Fields are. By the way, if you can hear some whining in the background, we'll get on to what that is in a moment. So first of all, amateur radio was having a problem where they wanted to be able to transmit your location to other people really quickly. So in the early 80s, 1980s, this was proposed. They devised this system where they divided the entire planet up into a thing called fields. They really arbitrarily just went, yep, we're going to just chop it round, and we're going to chop it at 180 degrees round. And the reason for that is, if you're in the UK, and there are a lot of amateur radio people in the UK, it's a very Western, there's a lot of in Japan as well, but it's a very Western world hobby activity. You'll find that there's less amateur radio people as you head into Africa and places like that. There's an awful lot on islands as well, which is quite fun. But they decide that to stop you having problems with negative numbers when you use coordinates, because usually you put the zero line through Greenwich. It goes through Greenwich because there's an observatory at Greenwich which was funded by the King of England, and it used to be at the Tower of London, the observatory, but the ravens, allegedly, as what the story we tell in the history books, would poop on the Royal Astronomers' telescopes and cause lots of problems. So the king moved him to Greenwich and built this Royal Observatory, which is now a science centre in Greenwich, and that is where they decided they'll do the observations from, and then that became zero. For the point of calculating time, it became zero. So GMT, Greenwich Meridian Time, or Greenwich Mean Time, sorry, is defined by an astrometric measurement. So zero, we just define that's where zero is, and all maps therefore go through Greenwich at zero, which is great when you are British. Not so great when you are living in New Zealand or one of these islands in Polynesia, and you have to deal with the fact that over here. Again, Maidenhead was a conference of amateur radio people, and they basically came up with this idea. One of the guys came up with this idea saying, well, we'll divide everything equally, and what we'll use is two-letter codes to work out where you are in the world. So if you're over in Brazil somewhere, you're probably GI or GH, and therefore you're in that box, that's your code. So I actually am in JO, which is a little bit rare for people in Britain because often we're in I, but actually I'm just on the little nub in there. So I'm in this, you go across, then up and down. When you look at the map this way, it all looks fair. Every box is the same size, and that's because this projection is not the greatest projection in the world. It actually means that the things at the top are actually stretched out, because of course all these points on this top row are the single point. They are the North Pole, or physically North Pole, maybe not magnetic. So actually the distance from here to here is much less than the distance from here to here. So it actually means these boxes are actually 20 degrees wide, not a fixed distance wide. So as you go down, these boxes actually get bigger, and then they get smaller again over here. They also decide there'll be the same number of segments going up and down as there are going across, but across there's actually 360 degrees. So that's 360 degrees divided, rather than up and down there's only 180, because you haven't looped around the world. You've just gone from the South Pole to the North Pole. But they decided that it would be nice if you didn't have to do any annoying maths with negative numbers, so they just pushed the problem to the other side of the planet. So A, over here, if you're over in Alaska and you're talking to someone in Russia, you will go from A something, AP, all the way down to RP. So you still have to deal with it, it's just push the problem to someone else. And I think it's rather unfair that they did that. I think we should just have taken that A was here and gone ABC or whatever, or ABC the other way. It doesn't really matter. Someone has to draw a line. It has to be arbitrary, and if you're going to take the pain and misery, then you should take the pain and misery rather than pushing that onto someone else. But that's what they decided to do. Those boxes are just too big though, and when using competitions you often want to use a second layer of boxes. So what you can do then is you can take any of these boxes and divide that into 10 both ways to give you 100 squares. So these are called fields, the next level down is called squares. Each one of these has 100 squares in it. You can take one of those and you go, again, bottom left is 0, 0, so I can say, okay, here, this person here is probably in 8, 4. So they will be I, O, as in Omega, the letter O, 8, 4. And so it's 2 letters, 2 numbers. So if I am in J, O, and I'm actually in J, O, 0, 2. So I actually have an O and a 0 in my code. And that's fine. So when you see these call signs, they kind of stand out if they're right or not, because they're 4, 6 letters long. Because you can then divide them again as you go forward. So it's kind of like a precursor to what 3 words, effectively. But much more mathematical, because you can work out from a coordinate which field square we're in by just dividing, just taking the math and dividing by 20 degrees, 10 degrees up and down, and then dividing that again and dividing that again. And you can also just take a stab. You can just say, well, over here, J02 must be, once you've got the J worked out, 0 is this first column of things, and 2 must be 2 up in the bottom. There you go. It's actually 3 up because it's 0, 1, 2. So you can kind of work out where we are. That gives you a box which you're in, and if someone tells you their locator, what you do is you assume they're in the middle of that box. They might not be. They might be really, like if someone says they're in JO, they could be really crammed up here, but I assume they're right in the middle, and I work out the distance based upon that. So if I'm going from JO to JO, I assume it's 0 kilometers. And it may not be. It may be a massive distance. But that's it. That is what they call the Maidenhead locator system. It's used in amateur radio a lot. It's a lot of fun because it lets you very quickly tell people where you are to a surprising degree of accuracy. And we accept there is accuracy or inaccuracy in it. Whereas when you get a GPS coordinate, you get 3 decimal places. You go, how accurate is that? Is that accurate to 3 decimal places, or have you just cut some zeros off? No, how are we doing this? Whereas with this, you can say, well, I'm inside this box. Good enough. But it also gives us something that we can then work. So, my daughter, in looking for things we could do together, because my dad's been transmitting for a lot longer than I have, and I've also got previous logs that she started. Now, she said, well, let's see in December, as part of Advent, how, over the Christmas period, especially when she's off school, how many fields and how many squares could we work? We kind of went, well, probably about 10. Because they're so big, once you've worked, JO, JN, you've worked half of Europe. That's all of Germany and most of Italy, and you've worked all these boxes. So once you work these boxes, it gets really tricky. Like this box here, MH, there's 2 islands. That's it. And then when you go into GM, there's nothing. You better hope there's a ship going across with an amateur radio person in December with an antenna pointing in our direction, because otherwise you're stuck. But I wrote some software. We merged our logs together. And it's not quite the end of the month now, there is still time. But this is what we've done. I'll show you this map first of all. We've actually managed to do an amazing number of fields. And so every green one is we've worked at least one person. I have to admit, all these ones over here are my dad. He's got a slightly better antenna than I have. I'm on a very long wire at 10 watts, whereas he's at 30 and 50 watts. I'm at 10 watts because I'm using the same radio as M7 SIA. Because she's an M7, she's limited to 10 watts. It's easier for me to use 10 watts than it is to reconfigure the radio and have her actually transmit at 100 watts or 50 watts or whatever. So we've decided both to work at 10 watts. There's also another reason which we'll get onto in a later video. So this is the map of G8PUE, M0 Oscar Zulu, which is me, and M7 SIA, which is my daughter. And you can see beyond expectation on how many fields we've worked. Another way of looking at it is this is a map where we're in the centre of the map because we're transmitting, so we want to know where we're working. So if I'm working on Japan, they're in a straight line this way. New Zealand's off over here, by the way. So this is an azimuthal equidistance projection based upon a midway between our houses, actually. And you see we've actually managed to work all of Europe, which we expected. Iceland, this box here, we actually got really late in the competition. We really struggled to find anyone in Iceland who could hear us. We saw a couple of people. I did see one person in this box as well in Iceland again, and they couldn't hear me, or the conditions weren't right, or whatever. So we didn't manage to get that box really gutted. And again, there are certain bot fields over here where we didn't manage to work. On top of that, I built a version of this where you could dive into it. So the KN field, we've been working KN pretty heavily. So these are the sub-squares in KN I've worked. And actually this afternoon I've worked a couple more of these squares as well. So we published this as a challenge. And this is what we're doing now. You can dive into these squares and say, hey, what squares did we work in December 2022? And it was a really fun cooperative challenge because I purposely haven't shown who worked which square. Where you see multiple people in the same square, that's usually indicative of a few of us have worked that same person. There have been a few special event call signs where we worked the same person. I think we've worked the same person here twice. But yeah, we've really enjoyed this as a program. The HM was me. I'm really proud. This was one of the islands in one of those ocean squares, so it's really proud. Not every square is workable. As you go north, because of this narrowing here, as you go up to here, it gets harder and harder and harder to work this band of squares. There's two rows, this Q row and this R row at the top. It's practically impossible unless there's a special event call sign, a scientist doing research on the North Pole, someone gone there to do amateur radio, and actually what we call activate the squares of the fields. But we didn't see anyone. It's winter. Maybe in summer we might see someone going up there and activating a field, but at the moment there's no one up there activating fields that we can see. And yeah, that's I think I've just been really amazed by this. So I'll totally show how we do it. What we've been mostly using is the most common method of amateur radio contacts at the moment, which is something called FT8 using a program called JTWX. Okay, so that is FT8 mode. So what we're using here is a mode called FT8. FT8 is kind of the encoding of the data, and it's a digital mode, and it's quite a modern mode. Most people will be familiar with Morse code. Morse code, we use it in amateur radio, you use something called carrier wave. So we actually call it carrier wave because you're using the entire power to transmit only dots and dashes. FT8 allows us to transmit characters, very, very short messages. And it's very powerful because it actually uses time. You can see these horizontal bars. I'll explain what these are in a second. So it knows when the signal should be, rather than normally when you have a signal, you look for a very high signal to noise ratio. The signal has to stand out and then you can decode it. Whereas this goes, I know when the signal should be, and that lets it decode very faint signals which are much lower. This blue area here is actually the input from the audio. So you see it drops down and comes back, and these are different frequencies. So this is a display of a low frequency to high frequency on this audio input. And you can see these spikes here means those are signals, but there's also spikes in between where you can't really see them on this. So what I do is I sort of flip that around 90 degrees, and for these high values we put a colour, a very bright colour, these low values put a dark colour. So what you're seeing here is every second the summation of the power at those frequencies. So here on these vertical stripes you're actually seeing signals. And as I say, this mode operates in a time base, so you have like an A and a B, or an even and an odd time slot. And this uses 15-second blips. So every 15 seconds you'll see a horizontal line drawn across. So there's people transmitting here and they're hoping someone replies on the other time slot. You don't have to apply in the same frequency band, but you apply in the entire bandwidth. So I can sit here and I can listen to everybody talking at once. And that's why this mode is really powerful. It's because I'm only using 3 kilohertz of radio space, which we converted into audio space to act as a modem. But I can then listen to all these people transmitting. As you see here, they're transmitting a lot. The way this works is this is a very strict data mode. It's very good for contests, which is kind of what we're doing here. And what we're going to do here is actually look for someone who's transmitting in one of the fields we haven't worked. So we look for these, or one of the squares we haven't worked. This is really about patience. What I love about amateur radio is teaching you patience. And there's this waiting for someone who's transmitting the signal that you want and try and get them back. So see these call signs in here. There's a KN there, KN22. I think I've worked KN22 already. KN is usually very good. There's WCR FM. I haven't worked FM17. And what I'm just doing is here, I'm just checking my logbook as it comes up. and it does a lookup online, but this previous flag isn't lit up, so I haven't worked this person before. This person's in the United States, and there's a big Bulgaria flag. That was because the previous person I selected is in the United States to be CFR. They are 6,000 kilometers away. I don't think he's going to hear me, by the way. It's a very low power signal, -15. And so he transmitted then, so he's talking to someone now, so I have to wait my turn. And this is what you should do. You should wait your turn politely. Also, I've just noticed that I'm going to transmit this band and there's someone talking in this band, so I'm just going to move off slightly to this. This looks pretty clear, so that should be good. He's struggling to hear the reply. It's a preset number of messages you send back and forth here. He's very, very faint. He's gone to -16. This is in decibels. I am using a long wire. I'm using 10 watts. As I've exposed, there's no LL34 there. Which, if I don't get it, I might go for them. That noise, that very, very faint signal. This is where I'm listening to on this window. It can still decode it, even though you can't see a very well-defined edge to either side of this signal here. The software can still decode it because it knows when the signal should be, and therefore can break it down. It's also very tolerant to overlapping signals, this mode. So if you have two signals that overlap, like there's a massive pile up here, it will decode all these signals independently. That JN99's back as well. I want to get them. Oh, there's so many signals to go. It's quite late in the evening here as well, and this is on 20 meters. My 20 meter band often disappears slightly, although it doesn't like. My radio keeps disconnecting, which I'm not happy about. So let me just make sure it's connected. There's another FN41 there at -19. -19 is too weak. If I can't see them at -19, they're not going to hear me at all. They may be able to hear me if their antenna was pointing in the right direction, but if their antenna was good, they wouldn't be at -19 for me. So the likelihood is either they're using very, very low power with really good equipment, or they're probably not got the antenna in the right direction. And I'm using a bad antenna, so I've got to just respect that. That thing there suddenly got very bright. It's because in Italian on the frequency. Now, you may go, well, that's very rude of an Italian to start talking on the top of them, and it's not. This person probably can't see there's a signal there. Just like I can't. I mean, there's someone is a little bit there. I'm going to shift up a little bit more. And it doesn't matter. Like, this happens. You can't see everyone. There's probably signals every single space here, because there's a lot of people talking. I did want to try and get let's go for this 7Z1 IS. 7Z1 IS is in Saudi Arabia, and I've been trying to get them a while. They didn't hear me earlier, and I don't suppose much has changed. They're at -16, so the scale is infinite in either direction, but the reality is that -20, you don't often see people less than -20. There's a -24 there, but it's rare to see things less than -20. It just can't decode. In fact, I can't even see this guy on the he's transmitted, but he's over here. He's very, very faint. So I transmit on his off go, so he's talking off go. I will give it 2 attempts. If he doesn't hear me after 2, I stop. Maybe I can change my frequency. I can check all my settings, which I can do anyway. Yep, that all looks good. But if he doesn't hear this, then the reason I do 2 is because sometimes people are slow to click the buttons. Usually, by the way, if someone's trying to call you and you don't want to talk to them, it's so fast that you just respond anyway to get them off, clear them off the books. So if someone's calling you, it's polite to respond. You can sort of tell by looking at the signal if it's the same as last time, that it's the same message. So before it's decoded, you kind of have an idea. No, he didn't hear me, so I'm going to stop transmitting there. Because no point wasting power and cluttering up the bandwidth, because even if he can't hear me, other people could. But they will block other signals that I can't see. So I would have been transmitting what looks like a blank space, but you just don't know. Anyway, that's what we do. We do this for hours and hours and hours and hours over the last 30 days. And every single person you work, I say, I've restarted my program, but every single person you work, you log them all, you put into a big log file, like this. Everyone we've worked, all these different people, all these different countries, Romania and Serbia and Hungary and Switzerland and Czech and Russia, Monaco, and it's really good because you're building up this idea that these are just people. It's producing harmony in the world. It's producing people talking to each other, and I think that's a good thing. So, but yeah, it's very competitive when you get into competitions. People try to outwork each other, do more signals, go further or go further with less power. Those are often ones. Sometimes people just ramp up the power and just go further and further. But I'm really proud of what we've done. I'm really proud of the maps, and the maps are pretty cool. On the Invalid Entry site, they are a bit hidden. I will put a link up, but the maps are pretty cool. You can see these are the fields and these are the sub-squares in the fields. So when we go into the sub-squares, you can actually see they are smashed together where we worked. Europe is pretty heavy because we can work Europe. We've got a lot in Brazil and places down. We've got a few in Africa, which is really unusual because we've been on a lot more. We actually got quite more in Africa, which is really good to see. I like to see African call signs appearing. America is still, especially far coast of America, is a bit difficult. Mexico has been very difficult for me as well throughout this competition. I say competition, not a competition. But I'm really proud of what we've done, so I just wanted to share that with you all. And what we did was, I liked this so much, I enjoyed making this little website. For the achievement of it was I actually started a new website. So we now have a thing called Ham Achievements. This is now a blatant plug for my new website, Ham Achievements, where I wanted to make a this is still an alpha. I'm still adding achievements in there, but I want to make things. So I've added the winter holidays in here. You can see my progress. This is just my personal progress here. The maps can take a few seconds to load as well. So these are the fields I've worked. I've actually worked one more here this afternoon, which I haven't uploaded my logs yet, so I've worked 10. Other websites do exist, and these are the websites. They often have all or nothing. So you either have worked everyone and get the achievement, but I wanted to break it down and say, no, actually, as you get more, you actually unlock more stars. So I'm at 2.5 stars for fields. So my dad is at about 4.5 stars. You won't get all 350 because, as I say, there's like 26 across the bottom here and 26 across the top here, which you'll just never get. So I've tried to make the field scoring better. So yes, if you work 10, if you work 20 or whatever, broken down by bands. We can then start adding in more achievements. Say yes, okay, on 10 meters have you done this, on 20 meters have you done this, make it more challenging. If people want it to be more challenging, but if they're new to the hobby, then I try to make this a lot more visual. We've also launched with all of the continents. I didn't want to launch just with America and just with Europe. Work with Asia and Africa as well, so you can go into Oceania and see how many places we worked in Oceania. If I open that up, it's going to say 0 because my antenna just isn't good enough. So I'll open up Europe, but we have got the other countries. There are some. When I was doing this, I did find this was really interesting, as I had to make decisions about what counts as Europe. I had to pick someone's standard. There's lots of people with different definitions of what is in and not in Europe. Where the European continent plate is. I see Russia. There is a thing called European Russia when it comes to hand radio, and Asiatic Russia. But my mapping libraries don't. No, I've got Russia, so it's in both Europe and Asia. So that's quite fun. And then, yeah, you basically try and work every single country. So these are the countries I haven't worked, and these are the countries I have worked, and a lot of those I've done this month as well, which is really cool. And if I look at North America, you'll see I've got only North of USA and Canada. I do have one of the islands as well, I thought, but obviously not. It has not been confirmed on here. So 2 countries, I've got 1 star here, so lots of work to be done. And obviously, for me to work America is much harder than it is for someone right in the middle. So if you lived in Texas, it'd be really easy for you to work Mexico and these countries and Cuba and places and Canada than it is for me. I've got to work a really long distance to work these countries. So 1 star for me, that's pretty good. If you lived in the USA, you get a star for free. Like you get 1 point just because you're in the USA. So these challenges may be easier for some people than they are for others. They are designed to be personal challenges, not just something like not a competition where you're competing against anyone. And I also want some more global progress ones. I'd like to, every couple of months, every 3 months so, launch a global one. So let's say everyone to do as many of something as possible. And you sometimes see that with when they try and promote modes. So I saw an RTTY day where everyone's just working RTTY just for the hell of it. No one does RTTY anymore. That day everyone's doing it. So yeah, hamachievements.org. I am thinking of coming up with the short form so you can copy and paste these into social media. They also, once you have in there, you can get into your logs and you can start your bragging. So there's a new version of this coming out. It may even be out by the time this video is out, where the distance is sortable and you can find your longest distance and you can link it. So you can go into these, like there's a 2001, and it comes up a little map, and then you can link this and say, yeah, look, this is my longest distance. And I'm going to try and get more stats in here, such as the power and the power over distance, all those figures which allow you to go and get achievements. If the other person has also uploaded a log, it will confirm it. So if both parties upload the logs, it will go, yes, this has been confirmed on both sides. This at the moment has not had the other logs uploaded because no one uses this site yet, no one knows about this yet. But yeah, I'm hoping to make this much more visual, much more fun, and we'll see how it goes. So that's what I've been working on. That's why there's been no YouTube videos for me for like a month. Is because A, I've been making this site, and B, I've been doing the challenges. I've been doing it with M7 SIA and with my dad JPUE, and I've really enjoyed it. And to be honest with you, I think they have as well. I know M7 has. I suspect J8 has, as he's done more contacts this past month than he has in the entire year previous. Partially because he was working towards achievements of working all the US states. So he wasn't really working in other countries, and with this challenge, say let's work as many fields, he was then able to go, okay, I'm going to try working more, really push himself. And you get these text messages from him going, I've just worked this other, I've just worked Iceland, because we were all trying to work Iceland. And I was messaging him saying, hey, Iceland's online, or someone in Africa, I can see them, but I can't get them. And I get a message back saying, I'm doing the washing up, you're stuck. So, you know, it doesn't always work out, but yeah, being cooperative I think is really cool. It's been really fun. And I got a website, so we'll see how this goes. You're probably going to hear more updates about this as I talk about some of the technology behind it. It is a Python website. It is Django. It is using a whole bunch of fun things to make it work. There is an async worker in the background which can do a lot of the processing of the data things. I'm also very interested in data privacy here, because it's really interesting how you manage people's privacy. If you've in amateur radio transmitting to the people that upload your information, that's a really interesting privacy question. So there will be some more videos coming out about ham achievements in the future. But that's it for now. This has been quite a long video, and thank you very much if you're still watching and interested in amateur radio. It's a hobby which people look at it and go, it's very technical, it's very nerdy. People go, it's very expensive. It can be expensive, but you find that the stuff you buy lasts forever. So my radios, I've got radios behind me, I have for a long time. My radios last me, well, this one is from the 1970s and I still use it to listen on. So the equipment can really last a long time. It has high resale value. I've got a second-hand rig here as well. So yeah, it's a really good hobby for people looking for a lot of technical challenges, because once you get past the foundation license, once you go into the intermediate, you start building your own equipment, you start building your own antennas, you start thinking about some of the theory of it. You can just go down the route of buying stuff and just doing the hobby as I've just got workstation and work modes. There's competitions, there's orienteering, there's all these things, and it's something that I got into. I was really interested. My dad used to do it, and my mum used to, but my dad used to do it when I was a kid. And I used to like twiddling the dials on the radio, and that was a lot of fun. Turning the antenna, we had an antenna turner thing. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. But in my adult life, it has also taught me a lot about radios, a lot about communication. It's taught me a lot about patience. So I really promote it as a hobby. Yeah, find your local radio club and go see what they're up to. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Please hit like, please hit subscribe. There will be more programming stuff, there will be more technology stuff coming down on this channel in the new year. So thank you very much.